Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes. Welcome to Everything Co-op. I happen to be in Birmingham, Alabama. Do y'all call it LA, Lower Alabama? So I'm here celebrating with the Federation of Southern Co-ops. They're having their 57th annual meeting. They were founded in 1967. They came out of the Civil Rights Movement, Federation did. And it's the 23rd Estelle Witherspoon Lifetime Achievement Award, and Congressman James Clyburn is getting that award tonight. And we have two gentlemen with us right at this moment. We are going live from the annual meeting. Mr. Ben Burkett, he's been on before. He's a Hall of Famer. He's a Co-op Hall of Famer. And Tremel Sherman. He's a young man that's been with the Federation, and he's a Hall of Famer and a making. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
So, Ben, since you've got the wisdom, the beard, the gray beard, and all of that, how long have you been with the Federation?
I've been a member of the Federation since 1981. My cooperative, Indian Spring Farmers Association, became a member in 1981. And I went working for the Federation off and on since 1988. So I've been almost 40 years.
Almost 40 years. And you are a farmer?
Lifetime farmer. Been farming since on my own, it says since 1973. My father financed my first year. That's how they do in the farming business. The first year, your father or somebody go to the bank and sign for you to get your money to buy your seed and fertilizer and chemicals and all that. 1 year.
You have 1 year to make it or bust. So where did you get the land from?
My father let me have 100 acres.
Okay.
And then I rented my uncle's land. So my first year out, I was farming about 300 acres. I started off with cotton. And then went to soybean. Because we grew cotton. We were the last, one or two of the last families that grew cotton in Forest County in the 70s.
So what has work been like in the Federation for 40 years? What does the Federation do, and what do you do in the Federation?
You see, the Federation main thing is cooperative, helping farmers organize themselves. So I seen cooperatives last 3 or 4 years, and we got some in Mississippi that's almost 50 years old. Third generation in the cooperative. So I seen farming change from the scale of farming change. You know, the average farmer now, if you're going to be a full-time farmer, unless you're growing specialty crops, you have to be farming at least 500, 600, 700, 800 acres. If you're growing soybean, corn, or cotton or something like that, cause the cost of equipment. I've seen the number of farmers go down. The one that remain in the farming acreage get larger. That's some change. But also I've seen a resurgence in small farms too. Like people growing free-range chickens, free-range eggs, and honey and specialty crops. And then we beginning in the Federation to do work with urban farmers too, like in the city of New Orleans and the city of Jackson. Here in Birmingham too, there's some number one 3 acres, 4 acres in the city. And you got a number of farmer markets in this city. So that created a. I was talking to one of my neighbors Monday. Him and I, we are farmers in the middle. We ain't big farmers.
Okay.
But we ain't small farmers. So he said, what we might need to do is go down to 10 acres. So he done figured out, well, we can make us $100,000 off of 10 acres.
Wow.
So I said, he might be right, but I said, I'm trying to figure my way out of farming business completely.
So, Mr. Trammell, are you going to step in and buy Mr. Burkett's farm?
Well, that may be a possibility. That may be a possibility one day. I will tell you this: Mr. Burkett was the first person that actually put me on a tractor and just gave me probably like 30 acres to just drive it, son, and learn how to drive a tractor. Like I say, my background wasn't necessarily on a farm consistently, but I spent every summer with my grandparents. My grandfather had an old tractor, but he would never let us drive it. So we was just a hoe in the shovel type youth. Mm-hmm. But we were always part of the selling process and the harvesting process. So when I got to Mr. Burkett, my first year with the Federation, he actually just said, son, can you drive a tractor? I told him, no, I've seen plenty of them, but I've never driven. So he actually taught me how to drive a tractor.
So are you going to buy his farm?
I did all that to Georgia. That's a possibility.
Mr. Burkett, you said you've seen co-ops the last 3 years, and in Mississippi there's some the last 50 years. What causes the co-ops to go under, and what causes those to stay for 50 years?
The one that usually go under is you don't just start a co-op just because you just want a co-op. It got to be a main reason. Mm-hmm. Some of them, they get this idea. One example, we can sell fried pork skin. So they have 4 or 5 farmers growing pork. They decided they would organize a cooperative around pork. But they didn't look at the long-term investment in what they were doing and working together and buying equipment. So after 3 or 4 years, they decided they came to us and said, we just going to disband because we can't work together.
Can't work together.
Now, we got the Mouston Farming Cooperative in Mouston, Mississippi. It was organized in 1945. It's still going on. It's been up and down, but they doing real good now. They closed the elementary school in that community, and they bought that school in 11 acres. So they have a place now. And then also Mouston was the last black-owned cotton gin. They stopped gin around 2008 or 9 or 10. So they had their own gin from 45 to 2000 or better. Well, they gin their own cotton, process their own cotton. So the president and all the people in that cooperative now is the 3rd generation. So they also have a store, convenience store, only convenience store in that little community. So they doing real well. They have we have Beat Folk Co-op, which is kind of struggling now. It was started
let me make sure I understood something first before you move on. That co-op you talked about, you said was formed in 1945?
1945.
I count that to be 79 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It came out of one of those resettlement with I think there were 15,000 acres under the Roosevelt administration. They broke it up and they didn't give it to them. Sold black farmers 100, 200, 300 acres of land. They still got most of that land too. And they built the house, they built the school, and you had so many years to repay that back. They did 6 of those, one in Virginia, one in Flint River in Georgia, Sabine Pass in Texas. It was 6 of them. Mm-hmm. And Mouston is still Tillery, North Carolina, Gary Grant, that was one of them. And I think if the federal government really want to help black farmers, they would just do something like that now. Say we're going to get 100,000 acres somewhere, and people that want to farm, black people, black farmers, we're going to help y'all invest in it, the land, equipment, everything you need. A lot of people thought those resettlement that was given to them, but they had to pay for it. But you had a long time to pay for it.
Yeah, I thought it was given also. I thought that 40 acre and a mule was we're going to give you 40 acres and a mule so you can farm like they did the homesteads out in the Midwest, West, and so forth. The people claimed their homestead, it was free. They didn't have to pay for that land.
Well, now, that did happen. My community, where I stay at, I did a little research. The land I'm farming now come from a homestead. My great-grandfather, George Tisdale, got 164 acres. Homestead, 1889. 11 other families in that community got a homestead. I'm fortunate enough to have that original document in my possession, signed by President Grover Cleveland himself, giving up 164 acres to George Tisdale in 1889. And I'm trying to figure how would this woman, about 20 years after the Civil War, but these black families, the Dancelers, the McNair, the McGivers, the Miles. So, and so the lady wrote a book about this. I think her name was, I know her last name is Gilbert. She called me one Sunday night and said, family that got homestead like that, which is true because I'm an example of it. They was able to build wealth, and they had the generation going off to college, like in 1889. Well, some of George Tisdale's family were going to college in the 1920s because of that land base. I find seeing my somewhere she actually did a book about homesteading. There was a lot in Louisiana, but most of them was in Oklahoma. And that came about though down in my area because of when they removed the Indians from Mississippi, they opened that land up to homestead for white. But somehow or another, a number of black families was able to get 164 acres. So definitely that whole land issue is important because that's the way you build real wealth.
Yes.
Pass on generation wealth, they just said.
Yes. Tremel, did your family get homestead?
No, my family didn't get a homestead. My grandfather had a plan for the family though. He went out and purchased 55 acres. And what he did was, out of 5 of his children, he gave each one of them 10 acres apiece, a little bit more than 10 acres apiece. And so with that land, he instilled in the family that they cannot sell that land. So that was it. But so significant about it is he bought those 50 acres probably about 20 miles away from his house. So he said, look, I want, as you all graduate high school, I'm going to give you all 10 acres, each one of you all, but you can't get it until you graduate high school. And once you graduate high school, you have access to that land. But when you graduate college, you actually get deeded that land. So each one of my aunts and my mom and aunts and uncles all have college degrees, and they all own 10 acres of land that they also took that same information and that same makeup and model that we now, as we get older, will have the deeds and access to that land ourselves.
So did you go get a college degree?
Yes, sir. I did. Yes, sir.
Where'd you go?
I went to Mississippi State University. Yes, sir.
And what'd you major in?
My major actually was elementary education.
Oh, you can use that on farming, I know. Yeah. With the chickens and the cows. Yeah, I can see the use of that. I thought you were going to say agriculture. Yeah, I thought that's what you were going to say.
Well, I will say this now. My background, I did go to school for elementary education, but I was an insurance agent for about 17 years. What led me to the agricultural side was I started working for a Alpha Insurance, which is Alabama's Farm Bureau. And so I began to work personally one-on-one with a lot of farmers, and mostly I would see a lot of African American farmers who would come into the office and they would apply for a USDA type product or some type of loan product, and they had to have the adequate insurance. Well, I found out that they didn't have it, and so I would then ask questions like, hey, do you got your tax ID numbers or farm track numbers? We start asking those questions. You find more no's. And then that's what brought me here. And we were coming in last night, and I said, it's been almost a little bit 10 years. Roughly 10, 11 years ago, I came to this hotel. I came here for
in Birmingham.
In Birmingham, same conference. I literally came as a representative to vendor a booth to express farmers about getting insurance. And to see it probably 3 years later, I became a staff member of the Federation based off just that one conference, that one interaction. And so that's what led me to here.
So what about that conference? What happened in that conference that would cause you to want to switch 17 years of insurance,
Yeah.
and you can make good money in insurance, to move over to the Federation? What happened that caused you to do that?
I will tell you this. When I walked in the door, the first thing they said is, hey, we need you to help set up these tables. I was like, I'm not here to set up a table. I'm here to man a table. Well, I started handing out pamphlets and brochures and started sending them on the tables, and they put me to work. Wasn't a staff member, and again, I still had my own table to set up. But also, to see when the event started, the cluster of African-American people receiving excellence in a field that I personally didn't think we had, I didn't know at the time that we were excelling in. And I then began to meet people like Mr. Burkett. He actually put me to work day one, and so we start connecting with the organization, and I found out more and more, and I began to do my research, and I was like, this may be something I need to connect more and more to, because again, this were a room full of, at the banquet, full of people that actually excelled in this farming industry, and they were all looked just like me.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So you found excellence. I would also suggest, you tell me if this is right or not,
Yes, sir.
you also experienced love.
Yes. And everybody met me with warm receptions.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, it was so much love in the room. And like I say, I saw African American people being appreciated in a way that I was like, well, maybe this is more to farming than what you saw on television, or maybe what you saw in person, that there is another level to this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mr. Burkett.
Also along the way, he married a young lady, and her mother was the president of a co-op. She wasn't recommended us. Because most of our members in the Federation, I mean most of the staff people, and it's, I don't know how many of them now, 60 or 70, come through us through our membership. So we put out we want to hire a cooperative development specialist. Well, that goes down to the grassroots first. So our members got grandchildren and children and things. That's how they get to be staff people.
Yes.
So it's a big family thing.
So that love that we're talking about, that Termel felt when he came into the conference 10 years ago, and he got so much of it, he married one of them. Okay, I got it.
It's a little of both.
I got it.
That's how it got here.
So it's black people helping black people. Black people helping black people.
Right.
Mr. Burkett.
And then he bought insurance. It's not an insurance to us. But we need insurance as farmers and cooperative with warehouses and trucks and all of that need insurance too.
You mentioned the co-op that's been around for 79 years. You said there's one for 50 years. You said that some of them they don't last but 3 or 4 years. And you said that a lot of times they don't work together. They don't learn how to work together. Right. So what causes the co-ops that last a long time, 50, 79 years? What causes them to last so long?
They eventually figured out how to work together. And there still is a need there. See, where that cooperative is located at is very isolated. And they don't have much choice but to work together. And most of them is I would say large side farmers. They grow 500 acres, 200 acres, 2,000 acres. And then it's a generation through. Their mother and father work together, so they kind of pick that up. And it just handed on down. And they get a lot of support, like from the Federation. Sometimes we've been fortunate enough to get support out of the state of Mississippi to help them. Sometimes foundation, but they have learned that they basically got to do it themselves. They can't always depend on outside support. It's good to get, but you can't build your whole cooperative around that. Like my cooperative was started my cooperative is 44 years old. So we're moving into the third generation of management.
And what's the name of your co-op?
Indian Springs Farmers Association.
And what does that co-op do?
It's a marketing co-op. We have a 10,000 square feet facility where we can wash vegetables, cut and bag them, process it and ship it out. It was started by 8 farmers in around 70. All of those deceased. We only had 3 presidents in 40 years, on 2 treasurers in 40 years. So that first generation deceased. We that's here now is passing it on to the third generation. Our biggest problem in my co-op and all our cooperatives is we don't have many young members. Like Milestone Cooperative, they all 60 and 70 years old, the one that's really doing the work. So now we got to bring in another generation to keep it going. And the pressure's on now, especially where my co-op located. It's my understanding they finna build 700 houses about 2 miles down the road. So the land value gonna get so high, you can't farm it to pay the taxes on. So the pressure is there. But then on the other hand, they built 700 houses 2 miles away. You got a ready-made market.
Yeah.
For your peas and okra and corn, soy, whatever. We grow about 20 different vegetables year round. So we harvest watermelon, peas, okra, ballpark peanuts, green peanuts, they say all that now.
So, Mr. Burkett, what message would you like to leave people with?
The importance of diversity in our food systems. All the farms don't need to be white. They need to be black, Hispanics, Native American. We need a diverse food system, and we need to entice the next generation into productive farming, because you can really make a good living out of it now. When I first started, it was labor intensive. Now it's management intensive. But I just like to leave the next generation to consider production.
Tremor, what would you like to leave people with? We got farmers. Let's go get some farmers, young folk.
Well, me being in that age gap between, I'm similar to like what Mr. Burkett said, is that the diversity But I also want to make sure that we bridge that gap between our young farmers, that we started creating more and more programs to let them see that farming is not just going out in the field, but also to make sure that they know that farming is an industry, not the way you can just make money, but you also create something. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll be right back with Mr. John Leggett will be with us now, and his wife Carol will be right back. Please don't touch that dial. Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oaks. Program is Everything Co-op. We are at the 57th Annual Convention of the Federation of Southern Co-ops in Birmingham, Alabama. We are broadcasting live. This segment, we're going to talk to John and Carol Zippert, who are Hall of Famers, Co-op Hall of Famers, and Mr. Otis Williams. You know, this October we would be on the air 11 years, and National Co-op Bank has been our financial supporter all of those 11 years. And NCB's mission is to support and be an advocate for America's cooperatives and their members, especially in low-income communities, by providing innovative financial and related services. And John, you've been with the Federation for a minute.
Since the beginning.
Since the beginning.
And Carol as well.
Okay. Since 1967, you two have been with the Federation.
Actually, we were our role in this was we organized some of the cooperatives in Louisiana that were part of the 22 cooperatives that organized the Federation in 1967. So we are among the organizers and founders of the Federation.
Yes.
So we actually started with meetings in 66 that led to the meeting in 67 that organized the Federation. And that's really why we came up here to be part of the broadcast today, because we have set up a committee of people who were part of the beginnings of the Federation to create a Federation of Southern Cooperatives Land Assistance Fund Memorial Legacy Project.
That's a mouthful, but I got a memorial project.
Yeah.
And how many people started it? How many?
Well, Charles Prejean, who was the first executive director of the Federation, he initiated this committee for the purpose of trying to figure out what would be the best kind of memorial to devote to the grassroots community leaders who helped to form the Federation, and some of the civil rights organizations and others who helped us at the beginning. So that's really what the Memorial Legacy Project is about.
So, Carol, what did you do in the 57 years you've been working with the co-op?
Well, I'm from Lafayette, Louisiana, and with my brother Charles, we worked together with our parish priest, Father A.J. McKnight, to start one of the cooperatives. And it came out of a literacy program that Father McKnight was leading, and Charles was one of the teachers in the literacy, and I was just following my big brother around because I liked him. Mm-hmm. And that's how, and people would say, well, why do we need to learn to, this was in 65, coming out of the civil rights, in the civil rights movement. And they would say in the classes, why, Father, why do we need to learn to read? It's not going to do us any better. We don't have anything or own anything, and especially when the 1964, because we started this in the early 60s, even before that, and I even sat in lunch counters and stuff, in Lafayette, Louisiana, to integrate them, and I was disappointed because they served me, But so it was, organizing the co-op we organized. So we was Southern Consumers Cooperative, and the idea was to use what we had, and we had lots of pecans, and in the town, in the rural area, and so we decided on a bakery. And the other thing that was common and really popular, fruitcakes. So that was the specialty. Our cooperative started a bakery and a fruitcake, and we did mail orders, and we got it publicized. And the members who started Southern Consumers, they saved. They got shares in the cooperative up to $300, and they would pay, like my mother, my parents, they would pay $2 or $3 a month until they got to that $300. And we raised with all of the families, and we raised like $25,000 and got that bakery going.
All right.
And then we found out there were others in the South who had the concept of working together that way. We began to find out what is a co-op. Father McKnight brought literature for us and began to just explore what that form of ownership was about. And we found there were others. We began to travel to Mississippi, take in the cars in Alabama, and meet those other black folks, leaders, community leaders, who had a similar idea of doing things together. And Albert Turner, Lucius Black, and folks like that. That idea began to germinate then about a union of groups where we owned our own businesses, whether it was farmers, producers, consumers, credit unions, and that's how the whole idea came together about, forming this union of cooperatives, organizations where we control. And so we started educating ourselves. We found out where there were programs where, they sent me to school and some others because they figured, if I was tagging along with Charles, that I would stay. So they sent me to Canada to the International School of Cooperatives and Credit Unions in Antigonish, Nova Scotia. And they sent me, and I liked writing, so they sent me to the University of Wisconsin in Madison for co-op journalism one summer to study there. So I came back and did the newsletter and mailed the fruitcakes, and they helped me go to college in Lafayette.
Wow.
Then it was the University of Southwest Louisiana. It's now the University of ULL, University of Louisiana at Lafayette. So they helped me go to college, and because I could go and come back and work part-time.
So, Carol, what were the benefits of this, you said union, coming together? It was early on to form the bakery. What were the benefits of coming together?
It was like experiencing the freedom that we wanted before, the freedom we wanted to live, because here we were directing our lives. We were using our gifts, our resources to, to decide how we were going to live, how we were going to build community. So for me, being involved in cooperatives, to me, that was my first taste of living my freedom, in that way. And it was power, because when you come together, you're strong, and you stay together, that gives you strength. And we were strong.
I got it. Now we're going to go to Mr. Otis Williams. I got this freedom and this power, and that's awesome. Otis, what role have you played in the Federation?
Well, I'll give you a little history. I was a student at Southern University, and I had a professor. His name was T.T. Williams, no relation to myself. And in one of our classes, he formed a co-op. And that was my first introduction to co-ops. I had no idea what they were before then. This was in 1963. Okay. When I graduated, I went to graduate school. And when I finished graduate school, I got this call from this person out of the blue. His name was Charles Prejean. Okay. And I had been recommended to him by this same professor, Professor Williams, at Southern, for a job. So Charles called me up, interviewed me on the phone, sight unseen, and hired me at the end of the phone call. So a couple of months later, I got in my car, drove down to Atlanta, had no place to live, stayed with Charles and Carmen for the first couple of weeks in their house, believe it or not, until I found an apartment, and they hired me. So I got an apartment in Atlanta, for which I never bought any furniture except a couch, which I bought from, what was her name, Gwen, the person who marketed to handicrafts. And a couple of months later, he said, "You're going to Epps, Alabama." And that was the Rural Training and Research Center. And the only employee at that time, well, there were two. His future wife was there too. Anyway, but Wendy Paris met me, picked me up at the airport, and took me to the Rural Training and Research Center, and that's where I stayed for 6 years, from 1971 to 1977. And I was hired as the ag economist for FSC, and I occupied an office right next to John. There was a little wall between us eventually, but before that, it was just us in this big room in the big house at the Federation's Training and Research Center. And FSC had a farm, and I was put in charge of the farm, actually. At that time, we had 200 or 300 acres of cattle. We had corn. We had a feeder-pig operation, and we had an animal scientist from Tuskegee. His name was Anthony, who was actually the day-to-day manager of that. And we tried to put together some type of operation that made sense financially. That's what the first thing that Charles said to me. You know, we need. So I tried to summarize everything that was going on that farm. And quite frankly, we weren't running it as an economic enterprise, okay? Because some of the things at that time actually made no economic sense, but we were doing them. Anyway, the feeder pig operation probably was the closest to that. Eventually, the cattle too, because we hired a vet who became the dean of the veterinary school later at Tuskegee University, by the way. A little history there. And so I did a lot of things. One of the things I did was working with the ag co-ops. We had an ag co-op down in Palmetto, Florida. It was a tomato co-op producers. It was run by a retired ag instructor from high school, Mr. McCrae. And they needed a more up-to-date operation. So she mentioned Father McKnight. She didn't mention the Southern Cooperative Development Fund, which was started by Father McKnight, which provided loans for co-ops that were members of the Federation. And so I wrote a business plan and a loan agreement, which was submitted to the Southern Cooperative Development Fund for that tomato co-op to get a up-to-date building facility, and it was approved. I think it was $75,000, $100,000. And they got a really, really nice facility for their members to pack their tomatoes. They even got a gas operation where they could harvest their tomatoes early so that they wouldn't spoil in the field. And then when it was time to market them, they could gas them and ripen them and then sell them.
So, Otis, in Southern, you had a professor that taught you about co-ops.
Right.
I didn't have that experience, and most of the people I've had on this show did not find anything about co-ops in their formal education. If they knew about it, it's because their parents worked in a credit union or on a farm or some kind of way like that. But most people don't know about co-ops. So I'd just right off say that you were extremely blessed to have learned about it in such an early period of time. John, you wanted to say something.
Just for the record, T.T. Williams, Dr. T.T. Williams, who was the person teaching at Southern, worked closely with Father McKnight, and Father McKnight worked with him at Southern to help develop cooperatives. So the fact that he was talking about cooperatives was directly related to our movement overall. And T.T. Williams continued to support cooperatives. He became something under President Carter. He was head of some, I think it was HEW at the time. Anyway, what I wanted to say was that we have a committee of which the three of us are on. There are about 10 people who were original Federation staff. George and Alice Paris, Wendell Paris, and others are with us. And we are trying to design a memorial legacy project, a remembrance wall, a series of walking trails, gazebos, gardens, orchards, pavilions at the Federation Training Center to recognize and celebrate the grassroots leaders of all of these cooperatives that really helped to start and develop the Federation, including former board members. And we anticipate that this would also be part of the civil rights tourism of Alabama. The Rural Training Center was recently recognized by the Alabama Historical Commission and the National Park Service as a national historical site.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to develop this memorial legacy project to blend into the rural nature of the Rural Training Center, but to also commemorate these folks who really, grassroots folks, who ordinary people who did extraordinary things. And we do need help from those who understand that grassroots people have a lot of power to make the cooperative movement successful and other movements successful. And this would kind of be a monument to people that folks don't know about, who really made a movement that came out of the civil rights movement for us, the cooperative movement, something that people could come to and celebrate and learn about and understand.
Carol?
I also wanted to add that, I just mentioned Atlanta. The Federation established a business office in Atlanta, but we still have the Rural Training Center. And in 71, the Federation set up, there were 14 single trailers for the staff and their families. So there were and we were all very young. In fact, John and I were married the same year the Federation was incorporated.
Okay.
So we 57, 57. So we were a community, and the Federation people, the staff and community folks help us build the structures that are there now. The new structures. There was one house, we called it the big house, on the land when we got it. But we built the administration building, a dormitory, and a cafetorium, auditorium.
Mm-hmm.
And the staff, committed like at least 1% of the salaries when they got paid, back to the fund for that. So
Wow.
That's what I mean about the power we had when you do for yourself, that, and before we left Lafayette, LSU, I guess, heard about what we were doing, the Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge, and wanted to get in on it because Southern was already in on it.
Uh-oh.
So they came and offered a fellowship for somebody to go and get a master's, so they sent me. And I went and got a master's in rural sociology and cooperative economic development.
So Carol, I've got a question for you. A little birdie told me that John Zipper took one of the Freedom buses down from New York. He came down to Louisiana from New York, and you caught him and wouldn't let him go back. Is that true?
He said he stayed for me and the food.
And
The Louisiana food.
that Louisiana gumbo.
Yeah, gumbo and hot sausage.
Necessarily in that order. I can tell you another story too. That just kind of related.
Otis, you're going to tell us another story.
Okay.
Tell us.
When I was at Southern, I read an article in the local paper in Baton Rouge about this couple who had gotten married in southern Louisiana, and of course they violated the miscegenation laws at the time, okay? And I didn't know and understand who that couple was until I was hired at the Federation, and it turned out to be John and Carol. That's who that couple was I had read about.
Yes.
We didn't break the law. We changed the law. After the case in Virginia, Lovings versus Virginia, which the Supreme Court decided struck down miscegenation statutes, which are statutes which said black and white people couldn't get married. And so we had civil rights lawyers connected with CORE and NAACP and others, went to court and got us permission to get us. They threw out the Louisiana miscegenation law. Then we went to get our marriage license from Harold Sylvester, the clerk of court of St. Landry Parish. And the first day we went, he said, "Meshe, I don't know what's to do. What book must I put this in? We have the white book and the black book." So we said, well, the whole idea was for you to have one book. So he said, "Oh, I got to talk to my lawyer. I don't know." So we came back the next day with 100 farmers and other supporters, and they gave us a license.
Yeah, I don't know what to do. All right, just bring him some bread pudding. Okay. So, where do you all see the future? You guys have been around for a minute. What do you see the future of co-ops, farming, federation, people coming together to find power and freedom? Carol, they're looking at you. Okay. So.
I'll try to answer that. You know, before I left the Federation, I wrote this paper that dealt with the loss of black land by farmers in the South. And at that particular time, there were 15 million acres of land that was owned by black farmers and other black people who weren't necessarily farming. Yes. In the South. And now it's down to 3.5 million acres. So I think that the future of the Federation is directly tied to the sustaining ownership of farms and real estate by African Americans in the South. Back in the early 70s, the Federation had a contract with the U.S. Department of Commerce. It was to assist black businesses in the South. It was a really huge contract under those circumstances. But when I looked at the people from the Department of Commerce, they didn't understand that farms were businesses.
Yeah.
Okay? And that was the main thing around which the Federation was created, was black farmers and the ownership of land. You know, so the future of the Federation, I think, is directly tied to that. You know, they had a conference, a business development conference, and Gus Towns was responsible for getting them to invite me. They didn't even want me to get on the stage to even talk about that. Black ownership. You're in the business of supporting businesses, small businesses, and you don't even understand that black farmers owning farms is a business. They did not even understand that. And I think there are people now, even in the African American community, who do not fully understand, comprehend, and or appreciate that fact. They do not.
I think that the work we have to do really centers around young folks and trying to help them understand that their leadership must be community-directed, community-based leadership. And, you know, we have other organizations that focus on that. I'm engaged with a group called 21st Century Youth Leadership Development, and we train young folks in community-based leadership. that whatever you do, use your gifts to help develop community, whatever those community needs are. Because I tell them, we're not saying you have to do it the way we did it, because use the resources. When I tell them about mimeograph machines where we printed our leaflets and all that, and that we marched and sang and went to jail and all that. I said, maybe you don't need to do it, but you have different resources. Use your resources, and that the technology that's available to them, they can reach folks much faster and a larger group at a time. So I tell them, use your resources for community development.
John, you have anything to add about the future?
Well, I think in many of the organizations that we work with, the people who are between 20 and 40 are missing. And I don't know why that generation of people do not actively participate in social change. But we have to figure out a way to involve them and help them to do that. And all of us, when we started this, we were in our 20s. And we spoke up, we did what was necessary, we made the sacrifices, and we need to do the education of people to understand that. We hope in some ways that the Memorial Legacy Project will help with that.
Okay. I really want to thank you guys for being here with us today and sharing your wisdom. I'm looking forward to the conference. Tonight is the dinner. Friday and Saturday we'll be in EPS having classes. So I'm looking forward to that. I don't know how we get to young people, but that's what we've got to do. That's exactly what we've got to do. Everybody out there, we appreciate you being on the air with us today. We'll see you next Thursday. Please live cooperatively to get power and freedom. Thank you.
The preceding program was paid for by Everything Co-op.